Di Nelly Sachs, epitaffi scritti sull'aria. La madre. Qui si addormentano tutte le parole. Qui tutti i dolori trovarono il loro posto. Le lacrime non conobbero alcun nuovo mare. Qui polvere non si posa. Tutto è ritorno.
Il mio paper oggi sarà in inglese per ragioni di tempo, però dopo una breve consultazione con qualche dottorante ieri sera abbiamo concluso che l'inglese e soprattutto la pronuncia americana può essere proprio incomprensibile per chi non vede l'inglese scritto. Quindi abbiamo trovato un compromesso, credo, un po' strano forse. Ho inserito qualche parola chiave italiana ogni tanto e qualche errore sicuramente anche, quindi vi prego di scusarmi per gli errori. Prima di cominciare però vorrei ringraziare in italiano Giorgio Rierano, Luigi Spina, Gabriele Moretti e tutti i membri del Dipartimento di Trenta e fuori Cristina Pepe di avermi invitato a partecipare a questo convegno. È un onore e anche un gran piacere essere qua e avere l'occasione di incontrarvi. E devo confessare che dopo il festino della cena di ieri sera e il pranzo di oggi non vedo l'ora di ricominciare stasera. Greek tragedy is full of deaths, violent deaths. So far as we know, the only exception of Ajax's onstage suicide in Sophocles' tragedy, these deaths are never portrayed on stage, sulla scena, for reasons including aesthetic and practical that we only partly understand. What the Greek tragic playwrights offer their audience are not the dromena perpetrated off stage, fuori scena, but the legomena that report these violent dromena. In his article with the telling title, Why Messenger Speeches? Perché i nunzi dei messaggeri? Bremer begins by quoting Cesare Pavese. L'avvenimento si risolve in parole. I greci infatti facevano accadere tutto fuori scena e i fatti diventano parola sulle labbra del nunzio. Bremer goes on to point out that Aristotle seems to be stating precisely the opposite in his Poetics, the very definition of tragedy that he provides with the elusive yet crucial notion of mimesis at its center. Nella Poetica, quindi, esti nun tragodia mimesis praxeos dronton kai utia pangelias. There is a tension implied here between the spoken word of messenger speeches, ta legomena, and the importance of mimesis, of acting, of spectacle in its visual dimension. In messenger speeches, we seem to have just talk, parole, 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 niente succede, nothing happens. This is Bremer saying nothing happens. By contrast, the importance of spectacle, of putting major events before the eyes of the audience, has been repeatedly stressed by critics and commentators, ancient and modern, including Orazio, in his Ars Poetica, who describes how the mind is less stimulated by what is taken in through the ear than what is brought before the eyes. Everybody is familiar with this passage. In the context of today's theme, as we reflect on words after death, le parole dopo la morte, what I propose to do in the next half hour is to turn to the legomena, sung by Orestes and Electra, over the body of Clytemnestra after they kill their mother in Euripides' Electra. This komos is a lament sung in responsion with the chorus, which reflects a radical emotional and moral shift on the part of the two children who have killed their mother and are then overcome with painful regret. If I were to give a subtitle to describe the central theme of the komos, il tema centrale, the Italian language would best encapsulate it. Il komos dell'Elettra di Euripide, pianto e rimpianto. I have included the komos in its entirety on the handout, so you can refer to the lines specifically as we go. There are many surprising and noteworthy aspects of this komos, and I want to begin by drawing attention to some of these. The main point I want to focus on today is how Euripides makes his characters not only report their deed, l'atto, with words, la diegesis, but actually has them reenact with gestures and mime the extremely violent deed that has occurred off stage. Non solo usano parole nel nunzio, ma mettono sulla scena davanti agli occhi degli spettatori l'atto orrendo di uccisioni che hanno commesso. Why? What dramatic, theatrical, or other effect is achieved by having these characters sing these words and make these gestures? Is it because, as Horace says, Euripides thought that the mind is less stimulated by what comes through the ears than what is before the eyes? I think the answer is more complex. The central point of my paper will be to show how the mimesis of the off-stage dromena, gli atti commessi fuori scena, and the legomena of the character's report, il nunzio, of their off-stage actions, complement each other in an exceptional way. Before I turn to this main point, however, let us note some other ways in which the komos is unusual. È un komos molto strano. This will help us understand how Euripides uses it to blur the separation between showing and telling, mimesis e diegesis, by combining the two, and to what effect, con quale effetto. One important way in which this komos is unusual is that it is also a messenger speech. Il famoso nunzio della tragedia greca qui è un komos. Usually, messenger speeches are delivered by anonymous secondary characters, heralds, slaves, nurses, and the like, who report what they have seen to primary characters, philoi or ekthroi of the dead. They are the ones who are directly affected, emotionally and practically speaking, by the death that the messengers report. After the report of the death, as we have seen with the paper of the Professoressa Chirico, usually we see the impact of the nunzio, of the message, on these characters. It varies. Hecuba, who responds to the news of the death of Astyanax or of Polissena when it's reported by Taltibio, or in the Trojan women, Astyanax's corpse when it is brought on the shield, and we have just seen the focus on the impact on Hecuba. Or there is rejoicing, the joy of Medea, when she hears the news that her magic has worked and the Corinthian princess Creusa is dead, burned alive, along with her father. In the play I am concerned with, in Euripides' Electra, we see a messenger report to Electra the news of Aegisthus' violent death, and Electra's joy when she hears that his vertebrae were smashed in his skull while he was sacrificing. In this komos, there is no typical sequence of the nunzio, the report of the death, and then the reaction, la reazione emotiva al nunzio. Report and emotional response are condensed into one because the internal audience, gli spettatori interni, of characters who are affected by the report are also the ones reporting. Orestes and Electra are talking to each other about a deed that they committed together, and they display their reactions to each other. In the Commos, then, Euripides, Orestes and Electra combine the roles of murderers, sono assassini, they have killed their mother, now they reenact the killing, adesso mettono in scena l'assassinio. They are also messengers, messaggeri, they deliver the report of that murder. They are also internal audiences, spettatori interni. They listen to each other and they watch each other mime the murder. Fanno il mimo dell'assassinio dopo. And they are mourners, sono anche dolenti. They react to the murder with grief and regret, pianto e rimpianto, all condensed into one. The last role I mentioned, mourner, dolente, affects the mode of delivery of the report. This messenger speech is not a spoken resis in iambic trimeters. It is a song of lamentation in responsion with the chorus. As Orestes and Electra combine multiple roles, they sing a commos that combines multiple speech genres that we typically encounter in Greek tragedy. Il nunzio, the messenger speech, and second, the song of lamentation, in which this messenger report is incorporated. The song exchange, questo amoi baion, between the matricides and the chorus, A, recounts the death of Clytemnestra, as it happened just moments before. It is not usual for killers to sing a lament for the person that they have just killed. The very identity of the speakers, or to be accurate, of the singers, contributes to bring out the painful contradiction, la contraddizione dolorosa, that these speakers are experiencing between the deed, l'atto, that they have committed as agents, come agenti, and its consequences, le conseguenze che vedono di fronte a loro, perché lo mettono in scena. Laments to the dead are usually addressed to the dead, at least in part, that are being lamented. Here, Orestes and Electra do not address the dead Clytemnestra, except briefly. Line 1229 on page 2. Almost at the end. La distribuzione delle battute è dibattita dai scolastici, come sapete. Non abbiamo tempo di discuterlo adesso forse, però vi riferisco al lavoro meticoloso di Stilo sulla distribuzione delle battute. Se forse questa è quella di Oreste, allora sarebbe Oreste che dice Phoneas et tictes ara soi, e questo sarebbe for Clytemnestra. The chorus also addresses Clytemnestra briefly. Page 1 on the handout, 1185, 8. Io tuchas sas tuchas, mater tecus, alas tamelea, caipera. Mostly, these lamenters address each other. This lament does not appear to have any concrete result. Non c'è nessun risultato ricercato in questo lamento. A desired outcome such as obtaining revenge for the dead and harnessing the power of the dead person, il potere del morto, as a means of exacting that revenge. La ricerca del modo di vendetta è invece precisamente cosa fanno Oreste ed Elettra all'inizio delle Coefore, dove cantano un commos, però prima della morte di Clitemnestra. Infatti, in Eschilo cantano per ottenere l'aiuto di Agamennone per uccidere la loro madre, mentre qui in Euripide cantano un commos in rimpianto di averla uccisa. So we have an unusual messenger speech here, combined with a strange lament. An additional feature that makes this messenger resis cum lamentazione extraordinary is that it is not just talk, talk, talk. Non solamente parole, parole, parole. It is a performance. È uno spettacolo anche. As I noted above, Euripides' characters do not only report their deed with words, diegesis, they reenact. Reenact è mettere in scena una seconda volta, sì, fare rivivere davanti a tutti l'atto che hanno commesso, the death that has occurred off stage. Mettono in scena con gesti e mimi cosa è successo fuori scena. Sto pensando ancora alla cena. E fanno rivivere e vedere a tutti e da se stesso attraverso questi gesti e mimi l'atto che hanno commesso. I turn now then to the central point of my paper, which is, as I mentioned, to show how the mimesis of the offstage dromena, gli atti commessi fuori scena, and the legomena of these offstage actions complement each other in an exceptional way in this commos. Not only does Euripides push to its very limits the conventional restriction that forbade the depiction of violence on stage by having the murderers reproduce the violence on stage before the audience, he also blurs the lines that traditionally separate showing, mimesis, and telling, il discorso, with a highly dramatically effective complementarity. How? This commos defies expectations when it turns into an onstage performance, a physical reenactment. There are gestures involved in laments. Ci sono gesti nei lamenti, ovviamente, soprattutto nel lamento rituale, come l'ha mostrato anche Alexiou, ad esempio. The familiar laceration of the cheeks, fouling the head with dust, the way Priam does in the Iliad, etc. But the gestures of this performance are not the traditional ritualized gesture of lament. Instead, the gestures that accompany the lament sono I gesti dell'assassinio, the gestures of the murder that has caused the lament. Ecco il paradosso, la contraddizione centrale di questa scena. I gesti del lamento sono I gesti che riproducono l'omicidio che ha causato questo lamento. We do not have any indication of what precise gestures would have accompanied the commos, but Orestes and Electra's words suggest that they are miming, fanno il mimo della scena, while they describe it, mentre la descrivono. 1205, Orestes asks the chorus, and presumably Electra, this is on page 2, Cateides, ecco lo spettacolo, Cateides, did you see how the poor woman thrust her breast from her robes in the midst of the slaughter? Cateides hoion hatalain exo peplo nebalen edeixe maston en phonaisin? One of the two siblings includes several visual details, dettagli visuali, regarding Clytemnestra's gestures, I gesti di Clytemnestra anche. How she put her hand to Orestes' face, il gesto di supplicazione, clung to his cheeks, and how he in turn dropped his sword, melting, tacomandego, when he saw the limbs that bore him and Electra pressing to the ground. 1208, 1209 on page 2. Prospedo ti theisa, gonima melea, tacomandego. In the words sung by Orestes and his sister after they kill their mother, and in the gestures that accompany these words, the legomena and the dromena that are being mimed on stage coincide, overlap, and complement each other. Si completano. The legomena bring the dromeda of the immediate past, l'atto del passato, l'avvenimento del passato, è messo in scena in the present moment of the hic et nunc of this Commos performance. I noted earlier how brother and sister fulfill many roles, hanno molti ruoli. Murderers, in the scene which they are reenacting, messengers, mourners, dolenti of the murder. But they are also performers, sono anche attori, and audiences, spettatori, that see and respond to the spectacle of their own action after the fact. Euripides conveys the extent of the dissociation between Orestes and Electra as agents, come agenti, and as spectators, spettatori. As they sing, reenact, fanno I mimi, and respond e hanno una reazione emotiva al loro atto, they become spectators of their action. Sono spettatori della loro azione, powerless to undo or change any of the devastating reality before them. Though they are the ones that did it, they caused it. They see for what it really is for the first time with eyes opened to the reality before them. This is why I included the quotation from Goethe at the beginning of the handout. The man of action is always free of conscience. Der Handelnde. The only person with a conscience is the observer, der Betrachtende. Central to our understanding of the significance of the relationship between word, parola, and gesture, gesto, in the Commos is the place of the body, il ruolo del corpo, in Orestes and Electra's Legomena, and in the visual spectacle, lo spettacolo visuale che lo accompagna, which they perform for the audience and for each other to see. I guess we are Orestes and Electra now. As they put the horrific scene that has taken place off stage before their own and the spectators' eyes, the retrospective lens, la lente retrospettiva, which Orestes and Electra cast on their action and on their mother's body in relation to their own, makes them see with a newfound lucidity, una lucidità nuova dello spettatore. They realize only then the human cost and the moral cost at which obtaining revenge for Agamemnon comes. Il costo morale e umano diventa ovvio, visuale, proprio di fronte a loro. Specifically, Orestes and Electra's vision of and relationship to Clytemnestra's body, il corpo di Clytemnestra, bears directly on their assessment, their judgment of the matricide, and on their perception, and the audience's, of the morally, socially, and religiously problematic nature of the killing that they have committed. Cioè, la loro visione e relazione al corpo di Clitemnestra influenza direttamente la loro valutazione della loro azione e della sua natura problematica, umanamente e moralmente parlando. As the spectators watch the murder on stage in a post-factum spectacle of the act of killing, Electra and Orestes' words and miming lead them to see not so much the action itself, l'atto, l'assassinio, but the focus is on the impact, l'impatto of that death on its perpetrators. Questo è centrale. The perpetrators who are now spectators, witnessing the aftermath. Orestes and Electra, to use a narratological terms, are focalizers of the scene. The audience, gli spettatori, guardano attraverso la loro lente, diciamo, emotiva. Through Orestes and Electra's eyes, the audience is led to focus on the bodies involved in the act of killing. Their mother's body, Clytemnestra's body, and their own body in relation to Clytemnestra. The body is at the scene's center. in that the matricides Orestes and Electra experience a visceral, excruciating regret, è un rimpianto viscerale e doloroso for having killed their mother. The retrospective vision of their mother's body evokes their regret. This regret is both provoked and dramatized through their body's re-performance of her death. It is in their body's performance e nello spettacolo dell'assassinio that they feel a growing sense of identification with their mother. Un senso di identificazione con Clitemnestra attraverso la rappresentazione del corpo. Accordingly, they realize that they are not just the perpetrators of the murder, but its victims, and their pain mirrors and echoes hers. È attraverso la rappresentazione corporea dell'atto che diventa una rappresentazione del loro rimpianto, che tutti e due provano un senso di identificazione con la loro madre e fanno l'esperienza di un dolore che replica il suo, quello di Clitemnestra, e mostra la forza dei legami tra di loro che sono stati rovinati. Si dice forse. It is interesting to note the very different place that is given to the body in the children's perception and depiction of their matricide in Euripides in comparison with Aeschylus and Sophocles. Euripides revisita Eschilo and Aeschylus' portrayal of the matricide in a new light, in una nuova luce, and offers a radically different approach to the issues of justice and morality from his predecessor and from Sophocles. Of course, we don't know whether Sophocles preceded or followed, but it doesn't matter. His choice, at any rate, is different. Euripides highlights, mette in luce, the prominent place that Orestes and Electra give to Clytemnestra's body, in their speeches, nelle parole, in their gaze, negli occhi, and in their gestures, nei gesti. Anche Oreste parla come se fosse Clitemnestra, ad un certo punto dà una voce a Clitemnestra. La linea 12:14 Boan de las ketande prosgenune mantithei sakeira te cosemon litaino paredon texeman e crimnath hostekera semas lipein belos. In Aeschylus, Eschilo, and Sophocle, by contrast, the body of Clytemnestra is excluded from the siblings' line of vision and their speech. The visual omissions in Aeschylus are even more extreme in Sophocles. The siblings, il fratello e la sorella, avoid any visual contact with Clytemnestra's body, with her corpse. Non c'è nessun contatto, nemmeno visuale, con il cadavere di Clitemnestra in Eschilo e in Sofocle. In Aeschylus, as in Sophocles, a robe, un indumento, fulfills the role of concealing, copre, Clytemnestra's body, il corpo di Clitemnestra. In the Choephoroi, after killing Clytemnestra, Aeschylus' Orestes holds up the robe that Clytemnestra used to assassinate Agamemnon. This is the point of focus, the cloak, not Clytemnestra's corpse. Copre, potremmo dire che copre, Oreste in Eschilo copre l'assassinio con il mantello della giustizia, letteralmente parlando e figurativamente anche, enabling him and the audience to avert their eyes from his mother's corpse. Orestes in Aeschylus focuses on I principi, the principles that the chorus, Electra, and Pylade believe him to have acted on, and in the name of which he is acquitted in the Eumenides, nel processo. Sono questi principi che sono principali, e il corpo di Clitemnestra è solamente, non è un contenutore? Sì. Murnaghan stresses how much speech, including the words spoken in the context of the trial, deflects attention from the body In Aeschylus, ta legomena dissociate from ta dromena in the name of principles. In Sophocles, Orestes and Electra cover their mother's body with a cloth. L'unica persona che vede la Clitennestra morta, il cadavere della madre, è Egisto. E questo è una lente incriminante, ovviamente. Euripides engages directly with Aeschylus and his portrayal of the matricide's reactions after. And so Pierre Judet de Lacombe speaks of meta-theatricality because the scene is so very self-consciously intertextual in its nature. È una scena veramente, ovviamente intertestuale e quindi c'è una metateatralità. In Euripides, before they kill their mother, Orestes and Electra adopt the same principles and values as Aeschylus and Sophocles. A, l'importanza di osservare l'oracolo di Apollo. And B, the importance of the vendetta of avenging Agamemnon. Then they reenact the scene of the murder, and then the mother's body is front and center before their eyes. La visualizzazione del corpo della madre, along with her corpse on the encuclema, presumably, leads to the recognition of the violation. So much, the recognition of the violation is so strong already during l'assassinio that Orestes says he veiled his eyes. 12:21-23. Egomen epibalon fare, corai semais, fasgano caterxaman, materos esso demas methes. La visione della morte della sua madre era insopportabile per Oreste già quando l'uccideva, ma non può velarsi la faccia letteralmente per sempre. Orestes copre Clytemnestra from his eyes, not only because he wants to avoid pollution, la teoria di Gould, she is supplicating, but because he experiences a form of aidos before his mother's body. Kateides, hoion hatalaina, etc. The aidos that makes Orestes veil his eyes is the same aidos that is evoked by the maternal body in Aeschylus. In Aeschylus, also, Clytemnestra mostra Tomaston, pero Pilade interviene. Pudai toloipon loxiu manteomata, etc. Pitting against the principles of justice put forward by Apollo, Orestes rapidly dismisses the reality of the living, breathing body of the mother that gave him birth. Not in Euripides. Più rapidamente? No, va bene. When the matricides embrace the position of spectators, the audience sees this radical change. The song, il canto e I gesti del commos together express the identification of the siblings. The language also. The gestures and the words spoken express the corporeal and inextricability. This is the expression of Murnaghan. L'inextrabilità corporea of their lives and bodies to their mother, which their Sophoclean and Aeschylean counterparts deny. When the siblings turn to one another, their reenactment is not a realistic one. The time, that il tempo, è diverso, ovviamente. The temporality of murder is rapid, presumably. Here, it is slowed, è molto più piano piano il racconto, perché ha un commento e anche ci sono le reazioni emotive e le pause che succedono. These legomena are slowed down by the pauses. For example, 1182, da krytagan osungon aitiadigo. Yes, these things are lamentable, and I am to blame. Elettra, colpevole. The siblings' words and gestures focus the audience's attention on the relationship of the bodies. We have il cadavere di Clitennestra da una parte, dall'altra parte i corpi dei suoi, diciamo bambini, però i figli, non sono bambini, covered in their mother's blood. So there are two different levels of corporeal presence. La presenza corporea in questa scena ha due livelli. First, the bodies on stage before the spectators, and the physical bodies of the actors which mimic the actions of the past and stress the different relationship between the bodies in the here and now. During the act of killing, violent, antagonistic. In the proximate past. In the present, sympathetic, shared pain. So, the reenactment is overdetermined. The power of the reenactment is that it serves to depict the murder quando cosa mettono in scena? L'assassinio, però anche il rimpianto, in gesti. Their words and the reenactment of the murderous act is not just a bodily and verbal reproduction of death. Vado a tradurre in una seconda. And a demonstration, a performance of the nature and origin of the painful regret that afflicts them because of it. Cioè, la rappresentazione ed i gesti dell'assassinio provocano il doloroso rimpianto degli assassini, e questi gesti, cioè questa messa in scena post factum, diventano quindi simultaneamente una rappresentazione del loro dolore. La rappresentazione dell'assassinio è anche, stranamente, la rappresentazione del dolore. Appunto, the bodies on stage already visually tell the story of the violation through their physical appearance. Se pensiamo a fisicamente come sono, c'è il corpo, il cadavere di Clitennestra coperto di sangue, insanguinato. Anche loro, Elettra ed Oreste, sono coperti di sangue. È come una perversione del parto, dove anche vediamo una madre coperta di sangue e i figli anche. Però qui la perversione è che la madre non ha dato la vita ai figli, invece i figli hanno ucciso la madre. There are verbal references to childbirth. Ci sono dei riferimenti al parto anche e all'inversione del parto nell'Elegomena. The chorus addresses the dead Clytemnestra's corpse and says, "You gave birth to murderers," 1186-8. Mater tecus, ala stamelea caipera, pathusa syntechnon hypai. They stress the violation, la violazione del matricidio diventa definito a partire dal parto. Matros ha seticten, 1212. Lamentano il cadavere insanguinato dai figli con un riferimento al parto. Orestes describes the position, la posizione del corpo della madre quando la uccide, dice Oreste, e questo è una cosa che ha notato Pierre Judet de Lacombe. Vediamo il parto ancora nelle linee 1210 e seguenti. Safoida, dice prima Oreste, il coro prima dice Safoida, diodynas ebas, ieion cleon goon matros hasektikten. And Orestes before describes prospedo titheisa gonima melea. Judet de Lacombe sees this, of course, as a reflection of l'enfantement, el parto. The word that maybe the chorus says, diodynas ebas, here again le battute, l'attribuzione è difficile. Odunai, of course, is the suffering of the mother in childbirth, è la sofferenza della madre nel parto. Odune. This has been discussed by Niccolò quite a bit. Labor pains, i dolori del parto. So, in a feat of poetic compression, e una compressione poetica, Odunai summarizes the interconnectedness between the harm, il male, inflicted on the maternal body, and the pain that this harm evokes in the perpetrator. When the scene closes, e quasi ho finito, prometto, Orestes' words again encapsulate the unnatural paradox, il paradosso, inherent to his and Electra's deeds. 1229. Phone ascetic tes arasoi. And so, the miming of the past, il mimo del passato, cioè il fatto di mettere in atto, di fare i mimi dell'atto commesso, is simultaneously a physical and verbal expression in the present of the performance on stage of Orestes and Electra's destruction. Their sense that the destruction of the mother entails the destruction of her children. The suffering, il dolore della madre risulta nel dolore dei figli che l'hanno inflittato. This pain is translated on the stage in the gestures, in the words, and it reveals the extent to which the destruction of a philos by a philos destroys the oikos entirely. I don't need to discuss the arrival of Castor and Pollux. Maybe in the discussion ne possiamo parlare di Castore Polluce. You know the story of the Deus Ex Machina. Non importano gli erini, non importa la giustizia, la cosa che importa è questo corpo della madre insanguinato. So, Euripides dramatizes and gives voice to the moral and social issues posed by the matricide in his play very differently from Aeschylus. In Aeschylus i principi e le parole sono prime, soprattutto nel processo delle ominidi. In Euripide, in contrasto, è il ritratto visuale che importa. We are left with only one certainty. Nothing is resolved. And this certainty, I think I can express in Italian. Concludo con un'espressione italiana che ho scoperta ieri sera per la prima volta. Stavamo discutendo di una cosa completamente diversa, però l'espressione mi sembra sintetizzare il tema che enfatizza Euripide in un certo modo. Ed è con quello che finisco. Di mamma non ce n'è una sola. Grazie.